Hello and welcome to part 2 of the weekend debate. It wouldn't be proper not to talk about gas when I've got two people here from interesting sides. Poacher, gamekeeper one, and of course the man who's fronted this whole thing. How many years, Barry, have we been talking about this?
Chris, help me. 2015, the gas agreement was signed, and I think, for memory, and it is because it's so long ago, I think the gas group was set up around about 2016,
That's right,
albeit very small numbers in the early days. It was just a few friends, and eventually got tagged onto a post to say, "Oh, Barry Murphy is trying to do something about this," and it grew and it grew and grew. But I mean, it's 4 gone on 5 years. It's got to be now, isn't it?
Thank you for all that time.
No, thank you. Thank you.
I don't do a complete history lesson here because that would waste too much time, but things have moved on. You put a pressure group on. You were, at one stage, the man that was meant to be sorting out this plan. Didn't happen on your watch, though, did it? You're now yelling from the sidelines and calling foul a bit, aren't you?
No, it is happening on my watch. So, by asking questions and putting ideas in the heads of civil servants and politicians who are in government now, you can still direct and lead things from outside. And I think basically we can begin to think that we've achieved quite a lot through the campaign over the 4 or 5 years, because on the Tynwald Order paper on Tuesday, the Communications Commission becomes the Communications and Gas Regulatory Authority, which was a major ambition of ours, was to have proper regulation by a proper body.
Not arbitrate, like the person in the middle.
Yeah. A second point is that in actual fact, the way that the law that's going through the House of Keys at the moment is drafted in the Gas Regulation Amendment Bill, we're actually going to have price control, and that's always been something that Barry and the other people in his group have looked for. They've looked to bring the Ofgem type arrangements to the Isle of Man, where we actually worry about the price, not only the profitability. Thirdly, the Manx Gas will express its disappointment with government and will blame it on government if they don't manage to give a 2020 refund and a lower gas tariff for the consumers.
I thought that was all done deal, wasn't it? The refund.
Nobody's got that as yet. It's difficult. Like
When's
I was saying.
Oh, okay.
So the way I see it is if you use a sort of chess game analogy, the opening gambits were pretty good. The middle game was played pretty well, and we're currently in the end game, and there's still lots of ways it can go. But Laurie Hooper's a good politician. Unfortunately, one of the crucial officers got poorly at the same time as I was fired, but we've got great consultants behind us, and I actually think we can still get everything that we were trying to achieve. It's incredibly hard dealing with a provider of gas that's owned by a sophisticated, rich private equity investor in the era of climate change and decarbonisation, but that's what we're doing, and I think we can get something out of this.
Explain to me what happened, though, in the House of Keys. I did question time. I was packing up my cameras, and then there was the second reading of the gas thing, and suddenly it didn't sound like it's all a done deal. I mean, you were picking up on this. So can you bring us up to date? Where are we up to?
So basically, the clauses stage of the Gas Regulation Amendment Bill will be heard at the end of January, and I had an excellent meeting with the Communications Commission staff and Cabinet Office staff in the last couple of days, and I will be drafting amendments which I'll put before members in the House of Keys to make the legislative arrangement sound. Barry and I are disappointed because we were always told through May, June, July, August, September that the legislative route was being worked in parallel with the regulatory agreement. That wasn't happening. The regulation was an afterthought, and they didn't get round to it till November.
That's
now we're making up for it.
What?
And it's just,
Sorry, I mean, what?
I said that to you, Paul.
I know you did, and I was saying, I'll be fine. Well, go on, Barry.
Limited time. I mean, so this is me really with sort of my gas cook. Sometimes I come and see you, and sometimes I come as the admin of the group, and sometimes I come as just a gas customer. So today I'm really here more as just a gas customer, because what's happened has happened. So they've gone down the voluntary agreement route, which was something that I didn't want to happen. That said, on the interviews I'd done with you, I made it fairly clear that what was proposed in the agreement looked a lot better than what we have currently, or what's about to go out very soon. So the 2020 agreement looks better, will be better, I'm sure, in many ways than the 2015 agreement. But just to reiterate, it's not what I wanted. I was full agreement with Chris that this needed a fresh start. And
legislation.
We needed a fresh start on this, because I mean it's fairly clear that if this was a greyhound race, the traps have gone up, but the greyhounds are still in the traps, you know. So first of all, again, I'm a lay person. I'm not involved in politics in any way. So when I only tell it as I see it from the sideline, and it's sometimes probably the best way to see it. There was a big hoo-ha about this when it came around in the November. Tomorrow was November, wasn't it?
October 1st.
October,
and then
yeah.
it was delayed to November.
So big discussion went on there for about 2 hours, and you know it all sounded fantastic. But of course, as soon as it's voted through, it quickly move on to the next subject. Minister Harmer, in my opinion, should have gone straight on to press, and there should have been a clear route laid out about what was going to happen next. It's not my place or position to be answering gas consumers about when this, regarding this letter, about when this refund is going to be paid, because I honestly don't know. Truthfully, I've never bothered about the refund. I think I would have been more than happy, as would hundreds and if not thousands of gas consumers, to give up that refund for a fresh start with this. But you know what? They dangled a carrot. Coleman fell for it. Shame on them, I say. There's two ministers in my constituency. One is Mr. Cannon. One is Transport Minister.
Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Failed me. I actually like Alf. I'd like to consider him a friend in many ways, but I feel failed. Certainly as a constituent, I feel failed. But then, you know what? We must move on. So we are where we are. But what I found extremely interesting was that interview you done with Chris Robertshaw.
Ah, yes.
I mean, I was amazed. Because
this is about the government getting it for very, very cheap.
2 pence.
It's
2.1
ridiculous. I mean,
kilowatt-hour.
this is crazy.
7 point something.
Basically a cost, isn't it? Then you got the domestic, and then in the middle you got the 600 odd people who are commercial users who are paying a fortune, or appear to be anyway.
The fascinating thing really with this is because I've come to see you over time. You know, you've interviewed me on the side of the street when I've been actually really quite angry, if not been really cold. And
I mean, when you've been demonstrating?
Yeah, with my Santa hat on once. So yeah, you know, I've gone through the motions with this one, but you see, initially in the early days, it was impossible to get any information from anybody about what costs various different people were paying. All we knew is what the domestic customer was paying. We never knew what the business customers were paying, and we certainly never had any idea that the government were paying 2.1p per kilowatt hour.
I mean, that is just cost price.
If not, well, possibly Chris Robertshaw, MHK, kind of could have led us to believe that maybe it could even be slightly less. But
I didn't want to go that far, but we don't know, do we?
We don't
exactly
know.
Sure.
But you see, I said to you, Paul, on so many occasions that from the maths that I have done myself and from other people that are in the group that are better do maths than I am, that we are paying way, way above what we should be paying here on the Isle of Man. But now it seems that we're actually subsidising the government.
And not only through the price, but also through the MUA interest charge at 6%,
yes.
whereas everybody else in government borrows at 2%. But Manx Gas, the Manx consumers are actually paying effectively 6% on the borrowed money for the pipes around the island.
Okay, just as an aside, when he was the one dealing with it, how did you get on with him? Was he giving you information? Was he being helpful? Or was it the same battle?
Well, I mean, you see, I understand how things work. I do understand how things work. But you see, there's two ways you can look at politics. I mean, you can either look at politics and say, absolutely useless bunch, only there for themselves. So else you can actually try to understand how the mechanics work. Okay, now I probably like to look at it both ways. I actually think very briefly and then move on to the second bit. But clearly, you know, Chris was a minister.
Yeah.
I mean, you only have to look at what happened in the vote, where it's the block voting system. It's like climbing a wall with.
But there were 10 MHKs and 3 MLCs who voted with Claire Christian's amendment. So we have got a large block vote, and there were quite a few others who would have gone over if they hadn't been persuaded at the last minute.
But you see, and this is going back to what you're saying as well.
Was persuaded at the last minute, what? To vote with the government?
Essentially, it was Barry called it the carrot that was dangled. You know, if you don't do this, you are taking away from the Manx Gas consumer the refund of £100 and so on.
And
seriously, I mean,
and you've got to remember, of course, with all of this, but as I say, we really have to move on with what's going to happen in the future, because we could talk about the past is the past, but you've got to remember exactly what Chris said about 15 minutes ago. He said that but basically there was supposed to be two ideas running in parallel here. There was supposed to be the voluntary agreement route or the imposed regulation route. So we
both are going ready to ready.
Yeah, but you see.
But they never got that one.
One was up there, and the other one never even started. So how were they going to vote on something that they didn't even understand what it was supposed to be all about? You know, it's not fair. None of this has been fair. But anyway, going back to what you asked me about Chris, you see, Chris was in Coleman. This is what I believe. He's never verified this for me, but Chris was in Coleman. Clearly, he has to follow pretty much what the Coleman route is on all
or get sacked.
So I never want. I believe that Chris got a very, very bad deal when he lost his position as minister. But that said, from a gas consumer's perspective, it's actually been beneficial. You know, Chris will get his post back as minister. I have no doubt about it after the next election because he deserves it. He's the best guy in there by a million miles, and he is. And I don't hold punches.
But are you saying he was totally held? Well, let's ask the man. He's here. Let's not just. What was it like then?
Minister for Policy and Reform is a position that shouldn't exist after the next election. We need lots of reform and change. We need lots of policy, but the Minister for Policy and Reform job is an impossible one because you don't have any budget, you don't have any direct control over any policy, really. The Chief Minister, I can hear him now, will accuse me of rewriting history, but that's the reality. I didn't have any budget and I didn't have any policy. I can be clever and have a huge influence. You can be even cleverer outside council ministers because then you're not constrained by collective responsibility. So I can ask questions to provide information that inevitably I think will lead to policy changing in certain directions. And so therefore since May the 27th it's been easier in one sense for gas regulation because I'm not inhibited by the constraints inside council ministers.
Let me try this one. Let's suppose he had stayed in that position, you'd still be talking to him about it and he'd have to be putting that stuff forward because it's come from the Council of Ministers, hasn't it? Am I reading this right? You would have to be putting forward the view of the bloc.
So if I got overruled, I was, lots of times in the last 3.5 years I was a minister, I was thinking to myself, do I resign on this issue because I disagree with council ministers? But whenever I checked it with my closest friends, and we've got to know Barry really well, especially in the last 6 or 7 months, but Barry and I are not closest friends, but when I ask my closest friends, they'd all say, no, stay there, Chris. There's so much
from inside the tent
could go wrong if you weren't there than if you are there. So I stayed there as long as possible. I was sacked in the end. I didn't resign. There were lots of issues I wanted to resign on, but I didn't. And when I was sacked, I couldn't really believe how silly it was to sack me because the argument I put was won in Tynwald. When I pressed the red button, the vote had already been won. I was on the winning side when I was sacked, firstly. Secondly, there were consequences to do with gas regulation, to do with planning, which made it much more difficult for government because we were in some very delicate moments there to do with HR, some aspects of HR. It was in the middle of a national emergency as well. And and at that point, nobody knew whether or not the Chief Minister would decide that I had a pre-declared position or not. He could have just walked away from it and nobody would have even noticed that I'd pressed the red button. He chose to make it into a major issue by sacking me. Nobody would have even known I'd pressed the red button unless the Chief Minister had decided to sack me. There are lots of people who... I
raised at the press conference. I'm not sure if anyone else... No one else knows at that stage, but I don't know.
And they needn't have done. They needn't have done. He would have lost a little bit of face inside the 9 of us in Council of Ministers. But so what? Ministers are losing face all of the time in Council of Ministers when they lose arguments. Chris Robertshaw, in a similar stage in the 2011-16 regime, got to a difficult decision and he resigned. I was sacked. I didn't think I would be sacked.
I'd like to bring Muriel. You must listen to all that, your views and comments, be it on gas or the way the Coleman is working. What do you think?
Well, this is one of the reasons we set up the Positive Action Group.
I'm going to come to that in the next section.
Because we wanted people to take more interest in what's going on in politics and to sort of understand some of it. And it wasn't until Roger Tomlinson sort of did a diagram of the block vote that I understood actually how it works. Well,
they just they get together, they decide, and then whoever's got the majority, you've all got to push the same button, haven't you? That's as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah. It used to be even worse because if you one of the things I did when I came back here was to sort of try and find out how things worked, and I used to go to the House of Keys sometimes. I didn't even know that the House of Keys was different from Tynwald, you know. We weren't really taught anything at school. We did some Manx history, but we weren't really taught how the sort of government of the Isle of Man. I understood something about sort of sheedings and parishes, and we used to go to sort of hustings for for elections and so on. But you could see them. This is before it was electronic voting. You could see the vote going round, and they would vote according to whether there was a majority or not. Or they would go out and have a cup of tea. I don't know whether they still do that. But
is this good or bad, though? This block vote?
And to go back to just to help you, it was actually different during the emergency from what you'd seen when you started getting to know more about it through PAG and through other things. Because during the emergency, we could actually see everybody's vote because we were voting on Teams. So that's how I knew that I'd already won the vote. So that's why I took about 10, 20 seconds to make sure that I wanted to press the red button, you know, and everybody's looking at me, what would I do? Because everybody already knew that I made my point. So therefore it was a matter of principle for me that I still had to press the red button because everybody knew that I'd been, I had that view. So to me it would have been, I would have lost face in front of the Manx public.
That's being really cynical, by the way. Shouldn't the whole of Tynwald and the government now be run on Teams? Because clearly the Chief Minister loves doing things remotely. Ow! I got it in. But, I mean, come on, you're a free thinker as well. You got PAG and all this sort of thing. What's the better way of doing it?
I suppose you've got to have some sort of control, haven't you? If you set yourself up as being the Chief Minister, then you've got to have some backing from your ministers. It's a matter of how much freedom they have and how much you want to control them. And that's the key. Really.
It's totally tight. You step over. You get 3 strikes. Was this 1 strike and you're off?
Me, it was my first time I'd voted against. Lots of other people have been given dispensations from collective responsibility for much greater differences. I won't name them because they'll hate me for it, but as I will, the Treasury Minister, for instance. The Treasury it's unprecedented in European global nations that have democracies for the Treasury Minister and the Chief Minister to have different positions for such a long time. But you know they have had on things like public sector pensions and so on and so on. The Treasury Minister read out the speech he made when he was a backbencher in the debate, and then him and his departmental members voted against council ministers and Tynwald's position on public sector pensions. That's quite major, but that was allowed. So I think PAG has achieved some of its objectives in the same way that the Gas Consumers Group has. So you started back 2005, 2006. Collective responsibility has loosened up, so now it has to be only about issues that are in the budget, in the programme for government on national responsibility.
If you have something in your manifesto, you can stick to that.
That was always the case. Now I didn't, but I shouldn't have been sacked because the issue I was sacked on wasn't in the national policy or in the budget or in the programme for government. So that's what was agreed to get Alf Cannon, myself and Kate Beecroft to join the council ministers. The Chief Secretary wrote to me 20 minutes before I was fired to say it has been determined that every decision in the national emergency of COVID-19 is an issue of national thing. So to me,
they're writing policy on the hoof, are they? Then
well, that's what. He was obviously very reluctant. That's why I decided, because it was only 20 minutes before. But it was becoming increasingly obvious to everybody that I was going to still press red, and so therefore, I got the email which the Chief Minister refers to, which more or less said, "You are arguing that this is not an issue of national importance. It's not in the budget. It's not in the programme for government. Every decision made in the COVID-19 national emergency is a decision of national importance." Quite plainly, it can't be, because Tynwald didn't agree, and Tynwald voted with my position. But the other successes for PAG, I'd suggest, is things like the Chief Minister is now only elected by the Keys after the change I bought Christmas 2018, I think it was, 2017 perhaps even. How time flies.
You've got a better memory than I have.
The other issue is Daphne Kane. Getting through this last week, second reading, that now 13 in to be Chief Minister, 13 out from being Chief Minister, whereas previously for a couple of years it was 16. That's in line with the PAG objective of bringing the people back into politics. There's still much more to do. We need much more campaigning.
Well,
from
we need
PAG.
the next generation, really, so that we can pass the baton.
Okay. Let's talk more about it in a second or two. That's really it for part 2, and more coming up.
Please like and subscribe to the Isle of Man TV channel. Thank you.